Well, good morning. My name's Brooks. I'm new here. It's good to see you. Been off for a month on sabbatical, and just thank you. Thank you for your prayers and your cards and your gifts and support and encouragement and all those things. It's been a restful time. It's been delightful. I've got to read and think and pray and so many wonderful things over the last several weeks. I was reminded again of Psalm 40 that says, "The Lord is wonderful." And you preached that to me through the sabbatical experience. So thank you for that. And it's great to be back. It was wonderful. I got to spend a lot of time with my family. And as you know, I've got 3 boys, 2 of whom have left the home or are leaving the home here for college soon. 1 is hot on their trail. And so I got to spend a lot of time with them over the last month, which was great. But honestly, I think they were ready for me to come back. And our family got a whole family vacation. I don't know that we've all been together on a vacation for several years. We got to go to Mexico together and spend some time on the beach there. How many of you, by show of hands, you're beach people? You like the sand and the sun? Some of you, 2 hands there. Yes, we got to do some of that. But when we got there, for the first 2 days, storms. Dark clouds and rain, spinning clouds like this one. And what do you do on the beach when there's rain and storms, And so one morning, I remember we walked kind of down to the beach. It's raining, it's gray skies and all the rest. And we walked down there, and I noticed there were a couple of guys with pitchforks in their hands, and they were shoveling seaweed into wheelbarrows. And this, because of the storms, all the seaweed just kept coming up into the beach. And I thought, man, that is an endless task. And I felt so bad for those guys. I thought to myself, well, it kind of prompted this question in me. Like, what do we do after the storm hits in our life? Kind of feels that way, doesn't it? What do we do just after the high winds are battering and the lightning scares the life out of you, But then the blue sky starts to peek through the clouds, and yet there's still this kind of disappointment that hangs in the air. What do you do? And you know what that's like. When the funeral is over, and the family and the friends, they go home, and you've eaten all the potato salad, and you get back into some kind of routine, but he's not there. She's not there. It's like the storm has passed, but the damage is done, and normal just isn't normal anymore. Or when the divorce has been finalized and all of the crying and sadness and shouting and negotiation has culminated in some ink on paper and the dust settles, but you wake up alone. And the storm has passed, but the damage is done, and normal just isn't normal anymore. You know what that's like? COVID came in a year and a half ago and just tore everything to bits. 4 million people dead around the world, 607,000 dead in the United States, almost 300 dead in Sangamon County alone. It surged in, and sickness came in like a storm. And some of you had it. Some of you experienced a short bout of pain. Some of you have lingering problems with it. Some have businesses have been decimated. School years have been ruined. Special moments, cherished moments have been canceled. Some people have lost income and homes and cars. All of us have lost travel plans. We've lost family gatherings, church services. It has ripped through us like a storm. The storm now has passed, we think, we hope, somewhat. But the damage is done. And normal just isn't normal. It begins to sound a little bit like the people of God in ancient Babylon. The time was about 540 BC, about 2,500 years ago, and the nation had been decimated. The nation of Judah had been torn up. The Babylonian army had come in and destroyed them and carried them off as prisoners. The prophet Isaiah had warned them about this. They were not living in covenant with God. They were neglecting God. And he warned them for 30 chapters in the book of Isaiah, sermon after sermon after sermon, where he's calling them back to trust God and to trust God. But instead, well, God's nation trusted politics over a passion for God. They trusted in diplomacy rather than divinity. They neglected God. And the storm came. These Babylonian armies came in and they surrounded the capital city of Jerusalem. And no one could come in or come out of the city. For weeks and months and years, they could not get to food. Food could not get to them. They starved. They resorted, and some of them, to cannibalism. They ate their own children. The Babylonian armies then finally attacked, and they came in and they burned everything to the ground, and they tortured people, and they brought away some of people into exile as prisoners, as slaves, all the way back to Babylon they walked. And the people of God were in exile for over 40 years. And they're looking back now, and they know the storm is past. But the damage is done, and normal just is not normal. But then, like a bright Mexican sun peeking through the clouds, God sings a song to his firstborn son, Israel. We call it Isaiah chapter 40. And if you have a Bible there with you, you can open to Isaiah 40 and the prophets. Over the next several weeks, we want to look at these chapters, Isaiah 40 through 55, a big chunk of this massive book. And in Isaiah 40, even after Israel and Judah's, even after their deserved destruction had come, God still wants to save his son. His heart still beats for his son, and it still beats for you as well. What does God sing to us after the storm has come in our own lives, when we've experienced something horrible and tragic and difficult? Well, let me offer a few lyrics that I think God sings here from Isaiah 40. And I want you to hear it this morning as a song sung to you. So first of all, the first lyric, I think, from Isaiah 40 is this lyric, take comfort. Take comfort. I think when storms, they come into our lives and they blow in, whether it's a health concern or financial pressure or a relationship, we assume that God is angry. And maybe his heart is broken. Maybe it's a lot like when you tell your kids over and over again not to wrestle on the trampoline. But they do it anyway because it's awesome. And then one of them falls off the trampoline and breaks his arm. And then what do? You're angry, but you also want to comfort, and you want to be there and help. God sings his comfort. He does not shout his judgment. Listen to the first lyric in Isaiah 40, verses 1 and 2, a lyric that was 40 years in the making. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. Now wait a minute. Comfort? They broke God's heart. They broke covenant. They sinned. And God owes his people nothing. In fact, if we were to be really honest, we would understand that God doesn't really owe us anything either. We too have sinned. We've rebelled. We've broken God's heart. We've turned our back on him, and now we complain to him when our world is not easy. Our nation complains and whines to God that a pandemic has wrecked us. We've ignored him. We should be thankful that we've survived it all. God could just walk away, but instead he sings, comfort, comfort. Nachamu, nachamu. It's the word that you would use to say to a grieving family who's lost someone close to them, like Isaac when he lost his mother Sarah. And not just this comfort, but did you hear these words are spoken to my people by your God? Did you hear that? That's without question language of the covenant. These sinners broke their covenant with God, and yet they are no longer the scornful, shame-filled this people of Isaiah 6. If you go all the way back to Isaiah 6, God calls the prophet Isaiah to him, and he says, go and tell this people. Now it's my people. You know the difference between that, right? It's like when your kids are around and they're running around acting like heathens, and if I'm around with my wife, I say, get these children under control, will you? Or worse, get your kids under control. God says, my people, whatever sins these people have committed, God speaks tenderly to them. Jerusalem will not rot in a cell forever. She has paid the price. The storm is over, and she is loved. Even now she is loved. And so are you. Whatever sins have decimated your life, whatever addictions have destroyed your family, whatever selfishness has hurt your relationships with your spouse or your friends or other people, whatever, even now you are loved. God's first word to his people, 40 years in exile, is grace. Take comfort, he sings. Take comfort, he says to us after the storm. His song continues in verse 3. I think the next lyric is, I'm coming. I'm coming. Because you see, when storms sweep through our lives, we assume that God is absent or that God is apathetic. He's not there, or he doesn't care. But really, God is on his way. God is making his way to us. He sings close. He doesn't shout from a distance. Listen to the prophet, verse 3. A voice of one calling. In the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Now imagine 40 years as prisoners hearing these words. Truth is, I don't know if it would comfort you that much. You ever gone through the ringer in life and had people pepper you with sing-songing cliches? Maybe you've lost a loved one and someone gives you what Kim Murray calls the agonizing at least statement. And they'll say something like, well, at least you had time to prepare for this, or at least, you're young enough where you can marry again. Oh, boy, that doesn't help too much, does it? Or sometimes we'll give what she calls the narcissistic I know statements. I know how you feel. I know what you're going through. I know your husband would want you to stop grieving right now. Really? Or when we've been through the ringer, someone gives us the shameful you should statements. You should stop feeling sorry for yourself. You should move on. You should. Oh man, those things, they just don't help. We've probably all said them in some shape or form through our lives, but what does help? When you're gone through a storm in your life, what soothes a soul in trauma? The answer is your presence. You just show up. And Yahweh, this God, he models this. He sings to his sin-shamed people, but he does it while he's on the way. The song paints this picture of God figuratively coming from Mount Sinai in the desert and making his way to Babylon. In fact, there's this miraculous highway that's being built right in front of him as he makes his way to his people. He's coming. I'm coming, he says. I know you're stuck. I know you're brokenhearted. I'm going to do something about it. I'm coming. Do you need to hear that this morning? God's saying, I'm coming into your circumstance. I'm working something out. I'm making all things new. In fact, he's here in Jesus. He's here in his Spirit. So what do you do now? The prophet says, get ready. Prepare. Man, when the king comes to town, you roll out the red carpet. But you only do that if you believe he's coming to you. And he's coming. He's singing, I'm coming. Get ready. Everybody's going to see it. I'm coming. Boy, I needed to hear those words a couple of weeks ago. I traveled to Southern Illinois for a couple of days. I was going to do some hiking in the Shawnee National Forest. By myself, drove down and went to the little Grand Canyon, if you've ever been down there, and hiked through there, and the Pomona Natural Bridge, and then around Cedar Lake there were some trails, and it was a beautiful day. Gorgeous, nobody around, complete solitude, lots of time to pray and think. And I had to drive on some gravel roads kind of here and there, but no big deal. It was fine. I walked around this like 4 or 5 mile trail around Cedar Lake. It was kind of mid-afternoon, and was coming to the end of the trail and came back to the car. Man, I was hot and thirsty, and I was ready to go find something to eat, and mosquitoes and all the rest, and I was ready to go. And I got back to the car, and the front passenger tire was about 3/4 of the way down. Well, if you've ever been to Southern Illinois, you know there was nothing around. I was probably 15 miles south of the big metropolis of Murfreesboro, Illinois. No cell service. Car was kind of parked on a slant. I didn't really think changing the tire with a donut was going to work all that well. So I thought to myself, okay, there's a little bit of air in the tire. What I'm going to do is just kind of drive as far as I can gingerly. I don't know how you drive gingerly, but I tried it. And kind of went and swerved around in the back roads and here and there and got just far enough maybe to kind of get into cell service, got on a bit of a highway, and pop, that thing blew out. And I was in no better place to change the tire there. So I got off the side of the road and I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? And then I remembered that our insurance company requires us to buy AAA. I don't know that I ever used them. So I thought, okay, I'm going to call AAA. And I called. And this guy says, okay, listen, I'm coming. I said, well, great. Should I, change the tire? What are you going to? No. He says, I'm coming. Don't worry about it. We'll assess it when we get there. I'm coming. And so I waited maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, no big deal. And here he is out in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. This tow truck comes rolling up. He says, let me put this on the back of a truck. We'll take you to the tire place. You're going to get a new tire, right? Yeah. I said, well, we don't need to change the tire. I thought, this is pretty nice. Maybe that's you. Maybe you feel like right now in your life you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere and the tire's blown and you're thinking, who's going to help? What am I going to do? And God says, I'm coming. I'm coming. There are people in your life who can step up and help. God sings his song to us after the storm. In verse 3, or rather in verse 6, there's a third lyric I want to talk about. God sings to us that nothing can stand in my way. Now, that's another thing. When storms come rolling into our lives, I think a lot of times we think that they're unstoppable, they're inevitable. But God is the one who can't be stopped. God sings strength. Verse 6, the prophet writes, a voice says, cry out. And I said, what shall I cry? All people are like grass. All their faithfulness is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers, the flowers fall, because the breath of the Lord blows on them. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. God cannot be stopped. People try to stand in his way, even powerful Babylonian people, but they are as fragile as a summer lawn under a scorching wind. Nobody can stand in God's way. Not your boss, not the union head, not the legislature, not the governor, not the president, not liberals, not conservatives, not your mom or dad, your kids, your teachers, your doctors or nurses, not criminals, not even your cranky roommate, not your elders, not your pastor, God's Spirit, God's Ruach. If even chaos itself at creation could not stand against God, then nothing can. Do you hear him singing this morning? Nobody can stand in my way. I am true to my word. It's like God blowing on a bit of grass. By the way, how's your lawn doing this time of year? Man, this year, I was going to have a great lawn, okay? I decided this year, I'm going to do it this year, all right? I'm becoming that old man, all right? So, early in the spring, I was outside seeding and fertilizing. I was weeding and feeding. I was doing everything I knew how to do, my father-in-law told me about this thing called 2,4-D. It's a weed killer, and you mix it up and you spray it on dandelions and clover. I wasn't going to have any of that stuff in my grass, I was going to get it all. And it was great. In May, my yard looked great. But then I made a mistake. I must have mixed that 2,4-D too strong. Because I went out and I was spraying some of the weeds and stuff around the yard, and it just scorched patches of grass. The week before my son's graduation party, you know, when everybody comes over to your house and walks through your grass. And on top of that, for some reason, a mole decided to visit our yard that week and made its little tracks all around. Man, one minute my grass was glorious, and the next, a burned out mess. God says, nobody can stand in my way. They'll be like grass that just gets burned up in my way. Do you need to hear that this morning? God says, I'm true to my word. I'm making all things new. Nobody can stand in my way. Well, the song ends, verse 9, with a lyric that I'll say sounds like this: I'll carry you home. When storms blast through our lives, we assume sometimes we're too far gone or we're too hurt, too banged up. But the truth is, God can carry us home. He sings his kindness. In verse 9, he says, you who bring news to Zion, good news to Zion, go up on a high mountain. You who bring good news to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up. Do not be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power. He rules with a mighty arm. His reward is with him. His recompense accompanies him. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. God deputizes all of his people, even those who are slaves in Babylon. And he says, here is the sermon you preach. Here is your God. Preach it. Fear can dissipate because God comes in strength. Verse 10, the sovereign Lord comes with power. He's a warrior thrashing his way through the enemy, and he's bringing his reward with him. Oswald puts it this way: God does not save his people with programs from afar. He comes close. That's good news now, just as much as it was then. But maybe like them, you think, wow, such a violent image of God, a warrior coming, sounds kind of scary to me. I'm a sinful person after all. But listen to this. To his people, he tends his flock like a shepherd. He leans down and scoops up his little ones and cradles them close to where they always have been, close to his heart. God comes to carry us home. He sings to his little sheep, to you and I. Can you hear his voice this morning? He's not interested in thrashing you. He wants to embrace you and to carry you home. God, in this prophet's reckoning, to me, sounds like a firefighter here, you know? Maybe you watch some firefighter shows on TV, Chicago Fire, Station 19, or Backdraft, if you remember that old movie, you know? Man, you get this image of a God who just bursts through doors and he axes his way through walls and he knocks him through smoldering furniture and he gets to his trapped child. And what does he do when he sees the trapped child? He doesn't yell at the child. He doesn't say, what are you doing in a burning house? He picks him up with grace and cradles him close to his heart and carries him home. And maybe this week has found you falling to that familiar sin all over again. You're in a burning house again. You know what you deserve. But instead, God comes bursting in. He's breaking down walls to get to you, and he cradles you, and he comforts you, and he's singing you a song. He's singing you, I'll take you home. Listen, we've had a group of Southsiders write and create a song this morning. I want you to listen to it on the screen as if it were God's words spoken and sung to you. There, take a look.
took your value, left nothing in return. Took your justice, took your honor, your embers in the end, took your last breath, and now they'll take their turn. I will rise an army in the night, look to the east at dawn's first light, and I'll take you home. I'll take you home. I'll take you home. I'll take you home. I took you first from the corners and edges of the earth. I called you mine, built my houses and settled you inside. Take all your rage, lay it on me. I will make it mine. I will rise an army in the night, look to the east at dawn's first light, and I'll take you home. I'll take you home. I'll take you home. I'll take you home. I'm taking the rest off my sword, the dust off my bow, ready for war and ready to show. Soon they will see, soon they will know. I'm taking the rest off my sword, the dust off my bow, ready for war and ready to show. Soon they will see, soon they will know. I'll take you home. 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 I'll take you
I hope you hear the voice of God through the prophet in that song. A God who's fighting on your behalf to bring you into his presence both now and forever in Jesus Christ. So what do we do now? Feels like the big question over the last year, doesn't it? What do we do now? The storm has come, the damage is done, normal doesn't feel like normal anymore. How do we respond? Did you hear it in verse 9 in Isaiah 40? Lift up your voice, God says. Lift up your voice. Sing along. You've got good news for your neighbors and your friends and your coworkers. Christ has come. He's defeated death. He is leading us home, inviting us to salvation. Lift up your voice. You have experienced storms, and maybe someone in your life needs to know that God is not interested in knocking them down. He wants to take them home. Lift up your voice. Maybe your kids right now need to understand, or your grandkids, that there is life after the storm, that anxiety does not have to rule here in Christ, that despair does not have to win here. Lift up your voice. Lift it up because God is converting the crisis. He's making all things new. He's taking what's broken and fixing it. He's wrapping slaves in his embrace and scattered sheep in his arms. He's converting the crisis. He's converting this crisis in Jesus Christ. He's converting this crisis. So lift up your voice and sing along, church.